Joining us to unpack the EFF's briefing is political analyst Mr. Sandile Swana. Mr. Swana, welcome to Full View. Thank you very much for your indulgence and staying to just watch that particular briefing with us. Very long, very comprehensive. Your initial views to the EFF stating that at the start of it, they are not in support of a government of national unity. What they're seeing this as is a plan B for the Oppenheimers.
Thank you so much and good evening. Yes, I think ideologically they've clarified the position, that they've taken a progressive position, which is probably starting from social democrat, socialist and communist position by South African standards, in opposition to a position that perhaps would have wanted us to remain in the status quo of white supremacy in South Africa in one form or another, and neoliberalism. So they've taken an ideological position to exclude themselves from the executive and to ask for positions in the parliament, in the legislature, oversight positions to inspect what the executive is doing and to take action on that. Mm-hmm. So that is where they are now, yes.
Mm-hmm. But are they not overplaying their hand insofar as seeking a speaker position? They want to field their candidate, Veronica Mente, perhaps, although they do say that they're amenable to anything, perhaps it could be a deputy speaker. They also want to field for chairpersons of portfolios. But that speaker position, is there any likelihood that if they were willing to vote for the ANC's presidential candidate, that the ANC would then be willing to vote for their own speaker candidate?
The position that, certainly from my perspective, that I have advocated, even when the letter came from Olomisa and company, the so-called smaller parties, was that probably it's about time that those who are in the executive do not take the positions such as speaker and chairpersons of committees in the legislature, because those are supposed to be the oversight positions. So the bigger problem we've had over the years is that the party doing the work wanted to also mark their own homework. They wanted to be player and referee. And the DA and the ANC hopefully are not going to drag us into that. And I'm not saying in saying that specifically the speaker must come from the EFF at this time. But certainly, I think they do need to give up those positions of chairpersonships and so on, and not try to also have majorities in those committees. Because when Zondo spoke quite clearly to say that Parliament had failed completely, I mean, we had lost our representatives to state capture because the executive and the legislature had become basically the same thing. And that is what they are trying to stop from continuing.
I want to take you to provincial level now, particularly in KZN. The NFP briefed a bit earlier on. Yesterday, the IFP briefed, and both these political parties are saying they'll be entering into the government of provincial unity here. They're looking to work together. So, meaning that the IFP is quite likely to have its own premier candidate, Tamin Tuli, endorsed or at least placed as the premier of KZN. The EFF has also spoken about what's happening in KZN and said principally the MK party must be given an opportunity to govern in that province purely because they received a majority of the votes there. And with the likes of the DA, we know for the longest time they've always felt or held the view that if they are the party with the most votes, perhaps they should get the first bite to even have those positions such as mayor or premier in this instance. The ANC, same thing. We've seen with the late Jessie Duarte. She had always said, that if ever there's going to be some sort of a coalition, that the party with the most votes should possibly be given the first bite. Your views on just those dynamics there in KwaZulu-Natal?
The dynamics in KwaZulu-Natal are going to be heavy. I think a lot of us, in seeing the numbers come out, we expected that the MK is going to take the initiative and form the government. But the business community, big business more specifically rather than black business, announced that they wouldn't want a government with the MK in it. And so the DA has taken steps, assisted by the African National Congress, to exclude MK in provincial and national structures of government, of the executive, and to perhaps, because they have no choice there, to leave it in the legislature. So that is what is done. And the question is, what tools will be at the disposal of MK to continue their struggle for change in KZN, the change that they would like to see?
On the NFP, I want to take you back. Our colleague, a reporter there, Ayanda Mhlongo, when speaking to us, just giving us a summation of what was stated in that briefing, she went on to state that the NFP leader also stated that with their talks with the IFP, they're not ruling out conversations around local government. Perhaps there are opportunities for them there. Now, this then tells us that clearly for some who had thought that perhaps all conversation would be left at a provincial or national level, it seems they're quite naive. The local government, as we've heard with the EFF now, will certainly be impacted by whatever conversations are being had at a provincial level and national.
Yes, the MK, even if it is excluded, and the EFF, clearly they've known this. I think to me it was obvious from the start that what happens from this point onwards is thorough preparations for 2024. So there's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of by-elections. There may even be defections from the ANC to MK, where by-elections will be necessary, all sorts of things like that. And when the EFF says tomorrow we will see their MMCs walking out of councils in various municipalities and metros, you are probably going to physically see that. So that will be the start of the battle for 2026 already, and they can see that the ANC is heavily wounded. It is bleeding. So both the DA and the ANC, interestingly, are now feeding off the carcass of the ANC.
No, it's quite honestly interesting times. It's just gone 7 o'clock. Just to remind our viewers, you're watching The Full View. We're in conversation with political analyst Sandile Swana, just unpacking the EFF's briefing. Still on this matter of what we're seeing here with the NFP and the impact that some of these conversations are having on local government. It reminds me of the 5-point plan that the Democratic Alliance published in 2022. They were of the view that we need to curtail the powers of these smaller parties or the kingmakers here. They were even looking in one of their points in that 5-point plan. They were looking to introduce some sort of a threshold that perhaps 1% or 2% of the votes would allow you to get a seat in legislatures. But if you couldn't, maybe you were 0.9, you forgo that. But because I remember particularly Helen Zille even going on as far as talking about rent seekers, saying that you've got these small parties that can collapse government. But here, if you've got the NFP with 1 seat, this time around, the Democratic Alliance and other parties that have raised concern about the power that these small parties wield is more than willing to have a conversation where it could even trickle down and impact local government.
Yes, you know, the DA and others and other politicians find a way of creating new consistencies where, to you and I, there are clear inconsistencies and perhaps even dishonesty. So it is what it is. But what I want to say about the so-called smaller parties, let's say so let's just agree on this point. Perhaps I think I must make this point that every constitution that is written on the fundamental beliefs, philosophical beliefs of a nation. Then that is then turned into law. So philosophy precedes law. What you believe precedes law. So the law must reflect what you believe. So what this means is that our constitution is designed in such a way that whatever our different views are, there is a mechanism that they can be totaled up into a seat in parliament. That is how the Rise Mzansi, the Action SAs get these seats. So Rise Mzansi is not just a so-called smaller party. There are actual physical legitimate citizens that have voted for that party. They are as legitimate as any citizen, as any voter of the DA, any voter of MK, and then all of a sudden they are being called smaller parties. and they are being ridiculed and pushed around. That is going against the fundamental beliefs of our constitutional order, which the DA and the ANC are claiming to protect. But when it suits them, they actually actively undermine that.
Mr. Swana, thank you very much for your insights this evening, as always. That's political analyst Sandile Swana speaking to us.